your behavior and others' behavior. And we attribute behaviors not only to kind of understand it and do something about it, particularly when you attribute your behavior, you want to also feel good about what happened if it was not that great. So this topic of attribution is very, very important. Say, for example, when you are late, all right? If I ask you, why are you late? The typical answer I get would be something external to you. Is that right? In general, very rarely, we show the courage to pause and think and say, yeah, this happened, or I'm really sorry. I have this habit of lazying around a little bit. So we typically externalize it. You'll agree? That's a general attitude. I externalize, you externalize, all of us externalize. All right. When we think about other people's behaviors, if you really like that person and you want to support her or him, you also tend to externalize if that behavior is not so useful, not so good, and you really like that person, you also try to externalize. Correct? It's not because of her. Circumstances were like that. Make sense? But imagine you're in competition with the other person. You really don't like him or you don't like her. Then how do you attribute? You attribute everything to the person. So conveniently, if it's about you and it's about your success, you attribute everything to yourself. If it's about you and it is something you really did not do that right, you messed it up, you attribute to situation. But if it is about other people, generally, if it is about the achievement or success of the other person, we tend to attribute that to the situation. And if they mess it up and if you don't like that person, you tend to attribute that to the person. So this is in general, this is true, and this is not that helpful. Imagine something went wrong. So I want to tell you, yesterday I had to give a presentation to the next year batch of Mari students. One batch is here, next year batch. So I talked for about 50-55 minutes. Honestly, I did not do a good job. I have two options. One, I can say that, oh, that did not happen, this did not happen, they did not tell me exactly what I was supposed to do, externalizing. Or I could say that, you know what, I've been running around and I did not have enough emotional space, energy to think, and I did not think it through. So, it did not go that well. So I kind of, in the first scenario, I externalized everything. Correct? In the second scenario, I'm taking a little bit more responsibility. Third scenario would be, you know what, I could have sat down for a few minutes and collected my thoughts, thought about what to say, what I did last year, and I could have definitely done a good job, or I could have sought help and probably divided those things up. Instead of that, I talked about Thapar University, talked about uniqueness of our course, and I kind of brought in all kinds of interesting things there. But somebody sitting in front of you for the first time, you're kind of coming up with all sorts of things would not make sense. So I did not do a good job. The third scenario is take complete responsibility. So now, if you look at first scenario, it's all about somebody else, very little learning, and also next year probably I would repeat the same. The second scenario is still better, but the third scenario of actually what went wrong and I did not do a good job, I messed it up, and I know what changes I need to make, probably I'll do a much better job. So that's the advantage of a reasonably clear, useful attribution. So this is very, very important. And before we go into attribution, we should also look at generally how do we actually make sense of behavior. You have seen this this model before. This is very very simple but bit high level. Human behavior, personality, your situation, your beliefs, rarely talked about. I want to spend some time on that. Then external events, and where are you working? What part of the network are you in? All right? You're working for a big multinational corporation versus you have a family business. Or you're part of 40,000 plus Thapar University Alumni Association doing a lot of interesting stuff. Or you are part of a startup network, or whatever the type of network you are part of. Personality and beliefs is all part of the person. And your situation, transcend events, networks, all part of the situation. What are transcend events? Something happened this morning, or your car broke down, or bus was late. Those are transcend events. You could get irritated, and those could reflect in your behavior. Right. Now, and it's a general tendency to mostly, as you saw, mostly attribute, especially our behaviors, we want to attribute it to the situation. Because if it is us and it's not a very useful one, we want to externalize it. All right? You know that challenge of externalizing or challenge of wrongly attributing behaviors would not help you improve, would not help you learn. So that's a challenge. Now, imagine you are working with someone. At my level, I have many colleagues, and I'm working with someone, and I see certain behaviors are not so useful when I look at the whole business school. How do I convince someone that this is not a useful behavior, and here are some possibilities, or here are some things you can do to change? Now, imagine someone gets angry very quickly. You have seen those kind of people in your life. Maybe you are one of them. All right? When you get angry very quickly, some people would agree that, there is something about me that makes me angry in this situation. Others would say that, you know what, there is nothing wrong with me. These situations are actually prompting me to get angry. You see both. All right? Now is the most important question. Take this example of someone getting angry very quickly. And many of them would like to change. Some would think that that's kind of normal. But now, if you want anyone in that situation to change, what kind of assumptions would help this person? What I mean by that is the two extreme scenarios. One scenario, this person is thinking, there is nothing wrong with me. These situations are causing me to get angry. That's one scenario, one extreme scenario. Other situation is, I don't know what is it, but I get snapped quickly. Two different. Which situation or which assumption would help this person as a first step in wanting to, or first step in the process of changing? So first situation is that the situation is causing everything. Second situation is, or second assumption is that something about me is causing this. So first is situational attribution. The second one is attributing to oneself. So which one would help you change? Why? Situation means you're totally externalizing it. See, that doesn't mean that situation is a trigger in most cases, because nobody will just get angry sitting somewhere and watching a movie, rarely. Okay, so situation is a trigger. But if you say that, the same trigger is happening to me and happening to her and happening to him, and only I'm getting angry. Same trigger. So there is something about me. That means about person. And when you say that it's something about you, then the question is it about you? That means it's about your DNA and genes, or it's about what you believe. Okay? And what is interesting? Generally, people don't like to think that this is my biology. People don't like. Why people don't like to think that something is kind of biologically predisposed, even if it is? Why people don't like it? Why people don't like it? We think if something is biologically predisposed, we don't have an opportunity to change. It's like our height or color of our skin or something, biologically predisposed, or the color of our eyes, it's predisposed, we won't be able to change. But when we talk about behavior, and even if you think that it's biologically predisposed, there is this idea of neuroplasticity. 100 billion neurons and trillions of connections. These neurons form. Neurons are brain cells. These connections are called synapse. These connections, your neurons can grow, new neurons can appear, old connections can disappear, and new connections can form. That's the whole idea of neuroplasticity. And also there is a whole field of study called epigenetics. Some kind of changes can happen also during your lifetime. So if you believe that this is something to do with my biology, you don't have to think about that as deterministic. You can change. But this is the beauty of that thought. See, I'm not an expert in behavioral genetics, but I can tell you, even if it is biologically predisposed, the extent would be maybe 40-50% of it you could be able to predict. It doesn't matter. But even if you believe that it is biologically predisposed, you don't have to think that, there is no way now it is predetermined, I have no opportunity. That is not the case. But the beauty of that thought is that then you would not think that my reaction is the most appropriate. Then you know that my reaction may not be the most appropriate, but kind of I'm trapped in my own genetic structure. You see, what I inherited as a living being has trapped me in that. You see, in some sense, many things are that way, right? Many things are predetermined. The good news is neuroplasticity. I don't have that kind of an opportunity to change my height. I don't have that kind of an opportunity to change the shape of my eyes or nose or something, unless I go for plastic surgery. But here, it's not easy, but you can work towards it. See, that's the beauty. So this is very important. Even if you think that it is your biology or your set of beliefs. And you also know that our beliefs are also in some sense influenced by the initial draft. What is that initial draft? When a baby is born, this is not a blank slate. There is something already coded there. And that one, some part of it is common to all. We have studied in our evolutionary psychology approach to understanding individual behavior. Certain mental modules are common to all of us, because that helped our ancestors to survive and reproduce. But certain other modules are unique to us. So those unique wiring of our brain, or that unique part of the initial draft, listen to me carefully, is going to act as filters and lenses when you see the external world. It will act as a filter when you make sense of the world, and it will act as lenses when you generally see the world. That means two children, same family, these filters are a bit different. So some things child A will pick up, child B may not pick up those and something else. You see? So, biology can influence your beliefs and beliefs can influence your biology. And there are interesting research evidence showing that there's kind of a bit of predisposition, biological predisposition telling us who could be, you know, I'm not talking about a particular gene is identified, you know, kind of the initial draft could decide whether you're going to lean more towards being a conservative or being a liberal, but you could also be predisposed to being a liberal, but if you have been groomed in a very conservative family, probably your liberalism will become a little bit milder. So, but the initial draft and with the life experiences, it will keep on revised. All right? And also remember, when we talk about beliefs, we all are lay thinkers, lay scientists, in the sense that if you have not, you know, most of us have not studied economics or psychology or cognitive science, but we have ideas about economics. We have ideas about psychology. We are all lay scientists to that extent. Yes? So there is nothing like genetic behavior, your behavior. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Huh? No, nobody is asking you to change anything unless you want to. I have been explaining, if you think you want to, then you should. If you think it's very useful, you should keep it. You see, a certain reaction to a situation, if you think this is not appropriate, this is not helping me, as an individual, as part of my family, part of my friend circle, part of my class, part of my organization, part of my society, you need to change. But some behaviors, you think this is very useful, you don't have to change. So I'm not telling every behavior everyone should change. That's up to you. If you think a particular behavior is appropriate, you keep it. If it's not so appropriate, but if you, the question I was telling, certain behaviors are not so useful. But if it is biologically predisposed, we have a tendency to believe that this is appropriate. Because that's how our mind would tell us. That's the difference. Do you see that difference? It could be natural, but certain, this getting angry quickly is the most interesting one. At least 30% of the people would think that this is the most appropriate reaction to this situation because I need to do that. So you think it is appropriate. You never think that you are trapped in that biology. You see, please remember, many of our behaviors are quite useful, but we still carry that evolutionary brain. Some of those were quite useful at some point in time, and not today. For example, our need to eat a lot of sugar for most people. Is it an appropriate behavior today? We can walk into a supermarket and buy whatever we want. But maybe 2 million years ago, you get something to eat and after a week or two, you'll get the next one. So that behavior, I don't think it's appropriate for most of us. But some people think that it's still appropriate behavior and they can keep doing it. So that's the point I was telling. Or eating a lot of fat. It helped us. It helped our ancestors to have enough energy stored. So, but today, you don't have to. And also, how many years our ancestors probably have lived? What would have been the life expectancy of our ancestors 100,000, maybe a million years ago? Probably about 25, 30 years. Today, it's crossing 75, 80. That means if you keep eating that kind of fat and sugar, you can have, and once you live beyond your reproductive age, evolution is not taking care of it that directly. Still, evolution could take care of it. You know why? Because children with grandparents living longer would have a much better chance of survival. So some kind of an indirect genetic selection is actually happening there. Good question, but the answer is, if you think you need to change, but the change is possible even if it is biologically predisposed. And no behavior, nobody can say that this is absolutely 100% of this behavior can be explained based on your biology. No, not at all. And it doesn't matter. But what matters is there is some degree of instinctual component to that behavior, and that you can deal with it. Don't think it is it's appropriate. That's what matters. Now, there are many interesting theories of attribution, and this might look a little bit kind of bit complicated or confusing, but at the end of the day, how do you make sense of, for example, someone is coming to class, okay? This is my class, and it's very difficult for me to just looking at that person and tell her that this is your habit of coming to class late, unless I try to find out, is she going to every class late? Is she going to be late every day? Or other people also late like her? So these pieces of information would help us. So is she late in every class? Or is she late just like everybody else? Or she's the only person late? Or she's only late for classes, she's not late for other activities. So these kinds of information are very, very important. Take one example. Seema is struggling in her finance classes. She's having difficulty with her finance class. Here again, the question is it because she's not a studious student? Then we need to understand, is she struggling in every class? All right? There are many important scholars contributed in our current understanding of social attribution of behaviors. You can internally attribute behaviors. It's more we talked about attributing to the person, and we can also attribute to situations. We have talked about that in detail. So one way of looking at it is she's a poor student because it is a dispositional attribution, attributing to that person. Or finance teacher is ineffective. You're attributing to the situation. See, these pieces of information, when you look at Seema not doing well in finance, look at it. Seema has always been a good student, only in finance is the problem. You see, that's an important piece of information. Seema does well in every other class, and every student is having difficulty in finance. Look at these three pieces of information. Yes?
So, being Seema poor, is it situational or distributional?
That's what we're trying to find out. He has always been a good student. It's an important piece of information. She does well in every other class. It's an important piece of information. Every student is struggling in finance. Now, we can attribute her difficulty in finance to the situation, not to the person, based on these pieces of information. So, there's a way to make these attributions, the quality of these attributions better by looking at this information. There's a little framework I want to introduce here. You can look at a person's behavior and look at through three little lenses: consistency, distinctiveness, and consensus. Consistency, when you think about consistency, see, the word consistency is generally used for, we all say that, inconsistent behavior. But here, it has a little bit more limited usage. Consistency over a period of time. It's more temporal. Today she's this way, tomorrow she's the same way, day after tomorrow, or in the morning she's the same way, evening she's the same way, afternoon. So it is temporal, across time. That's consistency. All right? Observe the same person in a similar situation, but at different time. That's consistency. Very, very narrow definition, not the broader definition of consistency, where it is time is not the only thing. We also kind of look at situations, also we say consistent, we use the word consistency. High consistency, same behavior all the time. Low consistency, different behaviors at different times. Make sense? So consistency across time. All right. Next one is distinctiveness. Observe the same person in different situations. Situation A, B, and C, always behaving the same way. It is not distinct, but with situations, it's changing. That's so. You're looking at that behavior through the lens of consistency and the lens of distinctiveness. The third lens is consensus. That is, you Seema is struggling, anybody else struggling. So you kind of replace that subject with somebody else and see. So consistency, distinctiveness, and consensus. So when you look at that behavior through these three lenses, you will get a fairly good understanding of how to attribute this behavior. And once you attribute it fairly clearly, probably whether it's your behavior or somebody else's behavior, you can deal with it much better. Is that clear? So once again, Seema has always been a good student. Seema does very well in every other class. Every student is struggling in finance, so we attribute that to. So Seema has always been a good student across time. Consistency, Seema does well in every class. Distinctiveness, because you change the situation. And consensus, every other student takes him out, put other people. It's not that complicated. It might look like complicated. The only complication here is the word consistency we typically use in a broader sense. Here it is only used temporally, time. Clear so far? Yes? Excellent. So now, I want to introduce Harold Kelly's theory of social attribution. Not that difficult. If consistency is low, distinctiveness is high, consensus is high, then we attribute that behavior to situation. You see, consistency is low. That means in the morning, in the afternoon, every time, different behavior. Okay? And distinctiveness is high, every situation, same, with situation, behavior is distinct. Okay? And consensus is high. Everybody is having same problem in a particular situation. So everybody is having the same problem in a particular situation. That in the finance class, everybody is struggling. Distinctiveness, very, very high. That means finance class Seema is struggling, but other classes she is doing very well. High distinctiveness, it's not kind of the same all along. And consistency, temporarily low. Then we attribute Seema's struggling in finance class to situation. Now, if the situation is consistency is high, every time it is same behavior, distinctiveness is low, same behavior irrespective of the situation, consensus is low, other people are behaving differently, then we attribute that behavior to person. It's not complicated. You need to understand three little lenses: consistency across time, distinctiveness across situations, consensus across different people. Is that clear? Any questions? All right, thank you. And I want to talk to the CRs so that we can organize our